G'day guys, Kiwi here again. In one of my earlier videos I spoke about trying to make a fishing bait dropper or a dropper system for the Phantom 4, or in my case this is Phantom 4 Pro, and was bloody horrified at $250 to buy these things off eBay and some of the drone stores because there's absolutely nothing in them. So I set about trying to make one and do it for a good price. We'll just start off. This is prototype number 1. So I'm using a receiver and another transmitter. Now in this case it's a Tyrannus or a Horus or whatever, and I have that, so it doesn't cost me anything. There's just another transmitter setting in there that I use for my homemade quads and airplanes and messing around. But I bought this tiny little receiver. I got this out of Banggood. I'll put the links below. And I think this was $5 or $7 or something like that. It's a little 4-channel PPM. Works on the D8 system from FreeSky. But you could use a Futaba receiver and throw the case away in an old bloody Futaba transmitter. Anything, even one of those little toy helicopters you got at home with the double blade things, counter-rotating blades. If you've smashed one of those up, just save the transmitter, save the receiver, hook it up. In this case I'm using channel 1 to trigger just a simple little high-tech servo. Now again, this servo is way over-spec'd for what it needs to be. This is a little HS35 HD. Now, this is the most expensive part of the whole thing. And if you were going to build this at home, and you're not going to go and buy one of these things for 25 bucks, just go to Tower Hobbies or Banggood or AliExpress and buy one of those little mini servos. I think they're about 5 grams or something like that, but they're $4 each, and that's all you need. Now, the reason I say you don't need anything better is, if you have a look at the way I've made this is just using a simple servo arm with a pull pin here, and that pull pin is operated by the servo, and it opens up this little gap here, and we'll show you later on how it drops the weight. But the idea is, by building it like this, is the servo has no weight on it. All it's doing is dragging this little pin out of a guide. Now the reason for that is when you go to a really small system and a light system and a system that has no load on the servo, you don't need a very big battery. Now this battery here, this is grossly oversized. I've got another one coming. I think it cost me $7. It's a little 200 milliamp 2-cell zippy out of some toy helicopter. It weighs 7 grams. This probably, I don't know, I'm not very good at, this probably weighs 20 grams. So imagine we can get a third of the size. And in this case, just for the sake of showing it, we'll hook this up so it sits here. So servo's on channel 1. Now I've only put 2 pins on the receiver, and you can hook the battery just directly up, like so. And as you see, it's all set to go. Now I can change these wires and put some much lighter wires on, like these little servo wires, because we're only drawing a couple of milliamps. I mean, so this is overkill as far as the battery weight goes. It's overkill as far as the cable size goes. But for the sake of demonstration, that'll do. Now, I did make a little holder up on my 3D printer. I got the cheapest 3D printer money can buy. It's an XYZ, the very early ones that come out. They were about $450. Best thing I ever bought. I've had it for 2.5 years now, 3 years coming up this year, and it's never failed me. Just keep it clean, and so this little guy, he just fits in there. I had to take a little nick out of the back of it here for the cable for the antenna. So we just sit him in there, pop that in there, and then I just used tape, just a Scotch tape, a clear tape, and just pop that over the pins, and that's glued onto the top of the little case here to keep any moisture and shit out. But I mean, you don't need that, and you know, you can leave that open the way it is, and just don't get it wet, or don't fly it in the rain. It would be about all. So that's the nuts and bolts of the thing. What I'll do now is I'll go and grab the fishing weight, and I'll show you some of the reasons why I've set it up the way I have. Righty-ho, so this is pretty much the entire setup, and as you imagine, that battery will be half the size or a third of the size. With much smaller cables, I'll just run them along the back and then up into the power here. And the on-off switch is just connect the battery. You're not going to put anything in there to complicate it. So what I've got is everything set up. You see I've got the old fishing weight here. And as I said, there's no weight on the servo. The servo's doing no work, it's just holding the pin. And I just have this set up just for ease of demonstration. This is not the way it's going to be. You just flick a switch and Bob's your uncle. She's gone. Fish bait or lure or whatever you want to toss in the water is there. And then to hook it up, the next one, there we go. All set. Drop it again. This is made so that when this mounts onto the frame, you can move the center of gravity so that the load is pretty much under the center. So you're not going to get your quad hanging on an angle or working to try and hold position because you've got your weight or the load off center. Try and get the load exactly in the center in the CFG. What's the idea of that? Well, first of all, if you can, always short sling the load. Keep it on the shortest possible length that you can, because what happens is you get a pendulum effect, and if you're flying in wind or any kind of turbulence, or you're up and down or whatever, then this thing's going to give the flight controller assholes trying to keep everything lined up and keep you flying straight. Whereas the shorter this is, then the less of this pendulum effect you get, therefore the less work your flight controller is going to have to do. The other thing is, in this case, for instance, with this weight, this is a 1.5 ounce weight, you could easily go, 3 times the size. This thing will carry it. You can haul that out 1 kilometre offshore. The camera is in such a position as when it tilts down, you're looking exactly where you're going to drop the weight. So, I mean, if you're looking at schooling fish or, who knows, tuna or whatever, you can fly over, get a bullseye over the top of them, flick the switch, and poof, your weight's gone. You can either hang around and have a look and see what's going to happen, or just bring the drone back home. Now, this will work on any drone. This has got nothing to do with DJI at all. In fact, I know I could probably dig into the guts of this and find a spare channel in there and hook it up so it works off the DJI radio, but I'm just not prepared to do that. It's not worth the farting around to do it. Okay, I know some of you are going to say, oh, that's a pain in the butt having another radio to take and all that kind of stuff. So don't worry, I've got that sorted as well. And the Mark II model of this is going to have a rotation sensor on it. It's got a little IMU and a compass built in. It's a tiny little electronics card. It's not as small as that receiver, but it's not too much bigger. It certainly doesn't weigh a lot more anyway. And what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go and fly out over the location where you want to drop your lure or drop your bait or drop whatever. That doesn't matter. And then so long as you do a 90-degree rotation in less than 10 seconds, it will sense that rotation and automatically trigger the release mechanism. Now, I just don't see that causing any trouble. I mean, I've thought about tangles and stuff like that, but, so long as you're smart in the way you rig this up, and, assuming that you've got your lead weight, and then I use a swivel so that gets rid of any spinning if the ledge spins in the air or the wind going out there. But then off that swivel, we also have our bait or our lure or whatever, so that we could even have a wire trace down to a lure, but a short wire trace. Well, that's going to hang below the quad. So when the quad does that 360-degree rotation, it's hanging below the quad here. It's down here. So it's not going to hook up in anything. Plus, you've got the downdraft of the 4 props blowing everything down. So that 360 rotation is going to be very simple. It'll auto-release, and back home you come, and 5 minutes later you've got a 250-pound tuna on your line, and you're set for the month. Now, what I want to talk about here is the cost of this thing. These things are going for $200, $250 on eBay and some hobby shops and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bitching about the price, because I understand that, a lot of people have to put a lot of time in to make this stuff and ship it, and stores have to purchase this and keep it in stock, and it's money invested, etc., etc. That's okay. If you want to buy it, go buy it. But here's the deal. This little receiver, I think, cost me $6. This frame, this is a gimbal protector for a Phantom 4, and I'll tell you a bit about Phantom 4 Pro with this in a second. That cost, they're going between $7 and $9. So let's say by the time we put some shipping in there, we got $10 and $10. We're up to $20 for this bit. The servos, if you buy those Tower Pro, I think they're 920s or something like that, the micro servos, they're $3, $4 each. But you buy them by the half a dozen. Don't buy one, because sure as shit, you're going to get a dud. If you buy 2 or 3 of them, okay, there's another $10. So we're up to $30 for 4 servos. Get 2 receivers. I'll tell you why to get 2 receivers. This one's cooked. I burnt this little bugger out the first time I hooked it up, and I do not know why, but in this really cheap electronics, sometimes you get a dud. So if you're like me and I live in South America, it takes me 6 to 8 weeks to get them. I always buy everything by the pair. And if I think I'm going to turn it into smoke, I buy 3 or 4 of them because they're cheap. So let's go through the price. $10 for the frame, $10, $20, say, for 2 receivers and shipping. So we're up to $30. And we can buy a couple of these servos for, say, another $10. $40, batteries $7, something like that. At the very most, if you're a tight ass and of Scottish origin like I am, and just buy one of each and it all works, seriously, this is less than $30 for the whole system. Now, the Phase 2 or the Mark II system with the rotating board, that's going to be a little bit different, because the board that senses the oscillation, that costs $15 as opposed to $8, $7, whatever it is for these things. I'll put the links in the bottom of the description. But if anyone's interested, let me know. I can help you out if you've got any questions. But holy Jesus, for fishing off the beach and places where you just don't want to stand up to your nuts and freezing cold water to try and get a decent cast in over the back of the breakers, this thing's going to kill it. I can sit on the beach with a cold beer, fly out over the back of the breakers. I'd go a kilometre and a half out to sea if I got enough line on the reel, and Bob's your uncle. Fresh fish in the bin for $30, $35 at the very most.